Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to share about East Carolina University's community school. In our College of Education, we had a theme, moving from success to significance, and we've adopted that theme at the community school. Today, our presentation has four major goals. First, we will review information about ECU's community school. Secondly, we will discuss a strategy for connecting with community partners to support teaching and learning. Our third goal is to identify potential partners that you could support or that could be of support to you in the teaching and learning process. And our fourth and final goal is to work to begin to design an action plan for connecting with community partners. ECU Community School is one of four laboratory schools in the UNC system. We are located on the campus of South Greenville Elementary. We have kindergarten through fifth grade at our school. When we first opened, the school was called ECU Laboratory School, and the community said, "What are you doing over there? Are you doing experiments on children like rats?" So the name was changed from ECU Laboratory School to ECU Community School because it truly takes a community of people to help educate our children well. In 2019, we expanded to being in this 8 classroom modular unit. So now we're in the wing at South Greenville as well as the modular unit. When we look at this school year, we have 108 scholars enrolled in our program. We call our children scholars. When we look at the community schools faculty and staff, we have 9 teachers, 4 teacher assistants, 1 reading specialist, 1 school counselor, 1 school social worker, 1 administrative assistant, and I serve as the principal. So what makes our school different? What makes our school unique? Well, we have an extended school year for our scholars. Our school starts when most public school units start around August 26th. When most public schools are getting out around Memorial Day or the first week in June, our scholars go to the end of June. We do this to help prevent some of the summer learning loss. We have an experienced faculty and staff at the community school. We have an integrated health collaborative team. That team consists of a full-time school counselor and a full-time school social worker. And we are very fortunate to have a full-time school social worker and counselor, especially for 108 children. That is ECU's commitment to making sure that we meet the physical and social emotional needs of our children. Prior to the pandemic, our classrooms were equipped with cameras, and we have strong university and community partnerships. So when we look at our scholars, 95% of our students transferred from a low-performing school. Because when you look at North Carolina's legislation, it says we are slated to work with students who are either A, identified as academically at risk, or B, they're zoned to attend a low-performing school under North Carolina's accountability model. 95% of our students would have attended a low-performing school in Pitt County. 95% of our students are considered academically at risk. 92% of our students live at or below the poverty line. 20% of our school population is identified as a student with disabilities, and they receive special education services. And if you know anything about numbers and special education in North Carolina, this number is actually high. Schools, usually they like for them to be less than 12%. Again, this year, 20% of our students are identified, and we've been as high as having 30% of our students identified. 96% of our students are African American, 1% Hispanic, 2% 2 or more races, and 1% white. Several years ago, we had a partnership with the Marriage and Family Therapy Department, and they developed what's called a biopsychosocial screener, and they took several childhood screeners and put them together, and they asked our family some very personal questions. For example, is food insecurity a concern? Do you have difficulty finding housing? Is there a history of adverse childhood experiences with your child or with you? And with adverse childhood experiences, this could be incarceration of a parent, death of a parent, separation or divorce, physical abuse, mental abuse. When our families took part in this screener, we learned that 82% of our students have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. 26% of our children have experienced 4 or more ACEs. And here's a photo of our children. They are absolutely wonderful. They have hopes and they have dreams, but for many of them, life has dealt them a tough hand early on. And at the community school, it is our goal to share it's not where you start, but we will help you navigate so that you can land in a better place. One of the strategies that we use is to establish a culture of consistency. Since many of our scholars have difficulties outside of school, we want to make sure that the community school is a place they can come in which they know that they are loved and that it is safe. And as a staff, each year we meet and we talk about what we would like for our learning environment to look like. We talk about behavior expectations in the cafeteria, in the bathroom, in the hallway, in the playground, on the bus. And what you're looking at is a rough draft of our work. You'll see that we've drawn lines through some things because we ask ourselves questions. Questions such as, is this written in child-friendly language? Are we being objective? And after we go through this revisiting and revising process, we make some pretty posters and we hang them in our building so that all can see. But it's more than just hanging them in our building. It is essential that we teach these expectations throughout the school year. We don't take it for granted that children know. For example, I have conversations with children all the time. I ask them, if they like to play sports and what sports do they play. Some will say soccer, some will say basketball, some will say football. And I said, okay, tell me how you score some points in football. So they'll tell me what you do to score a touchdown. They know the rules of the game. And I share with them, I want them to know the rules of the game as it relates to school. This will help you to be successful. Even in the midst of the pandemic, we worked to establish a culture of consistency. Our school did shut down in March 2020 for the pandemic, but in August, we were able to open our doors and have in-person instruction for children. At first, our families were a little hesitant, and we had about 50% of our children to attend school. But by October, over 80% of our children were attending school daily. We practiced great social distancing and hand washing procedures, and we can say that we went from August to April and did not have a confirmed case of COVID. The work that we do, we are very thankful for our university partners. The partners that you see listed on the screen help us to meet the physical, social, emotional, and academic needs of our students. For example, in the College of Allied Health Sciences, our partnership with the Communication Disorders Department, we have a faculty member who is a licensed speech language pathologist to come to our campus, and she has graduate students, those students who are studying to become speech language pathologists, to offer services to our children who have identified services on their IEP. But they also are very proactive, and we have what's called the Pirate Play Group. And I'll talk a bit about the Pirate Play Group a little later in the presentation. The Pirate Play Group is a proactive strategy in which supports oral language development. Also out of the College of Allied Health Sciences, occupational therapy services are provided for our students. In the College of Health and Human Performance, we work with the Birth to Kindergarten program, and in the past work with the Marriage and Family Therapy Department. Out of the School of Dental Medicine, We have dental students that come each week to our school and they talk about proper brushing and flossing techniques and the importance of good oral hygiene. In the Honors College, we have students who come and volunteer, such as on open house night, or we recently had during homecoming week a little pirate tailgate where they interacted with the students. And this is amazing to have the college students interact with the elementary school students. Our elementary students will ask them questions like, well, what's it like to go to college? It's just fun. What type of work do you do? How do you get into college? And this helps to plant seeds in our children because for some of them, they do not have family members who've been to college. So these college students serve as great role models. ECU Athletics Department, we've had an opportunity to take our children to see games at ECU. ECU Human Resources Department, we've had volunteers to come and read with our children. And ECU Police Department, our school resource officer is actually an ECU police officer. And this is an agreement, a partnership between ECU and Pitt County Schools. When we look at the College of Education, all of these departments and institutes and labs play an important role on our campus. For example, in the Literacy Studies Department and the Mathematics Department, we have faculty members that come to our campus. They provide professional development for our teachers. They work directly with our students. They help assess the students. They help teachers interpret the results of the assessments. They help with instructional planning and selecting resources. And in several cases, they work within the classroom to see how students respond to lessons, and they are able to provide that feedback to their pre-service educators. In the Science Education Department, they do an annual science fair night for us where families have a chance to participate in hands-on activities. In the Clemmy Counseling and Research Lab, they provide on-site mental health services for our students and our families. So to receive those services, our families don't need to have or leave campus. They are able to get that support right here within our building. Also, a very special thank you to Pitt County Schools. All of the departments and offices that you see there are key for us. Pitt County Schools provides transportation for our students. They provide child nutrition services for our students. The superintendent frequently pops by to see how we're doing and if we need anything. The superintendent's philosophy, and that superintendent is Dr. Steve Lassiter. His philosophy is that the children are with us for kindergarten to fifth grade, but eventually they will return to Pitt County Schools for middle school. So yes, we need to support the students to help them be successful. So we are very thankful for our partners. What does it look like for our children? From the moment they arrive on campus, they have a warm greeting and we do a pulse check. We're looking to see, did something happen on the bus that may cause them to have a tough day? Or perhaps did something happen at home? Anything that we can do to help remove those barriers, to help children focus on teaching and learning, we're willing to do. We have individual and small group sessions conducted by our Integrated Health Collaborative team, again by the School Counseling Division of the College of Education, and by faculty members and interns from the Psychology Department. They actually run small groups such as anger management and self-regulation. Consistently, we work to model pirate expectations. This is how we do business at the community school. I mentioned earlier that 20% of our students are identified as students with disabilities, so we offer a continuum of services. We also have pre-service educators to come in our building, those who are completing their internships and student teaching. We have a Breakfast Buddies program where those who are gaining practicum hours can come and work with students on specific skills. In-school tutoring, after-school tutoring, and as I mentioned earlier from the College of Allied Health Sciences, occupational therapy services, physical therapy services, and speech language services. When we look at all the work of our partners and we look as a staff as we strive to establish a culture of consistency, we've noticed that our scholar discipline has declined. From 2018 to 2023, the number of out-of-school suspensions declined. The number of administrative conferences declined. And the number of bus suspensions declined. Now in 23-24, we had a little bump. We had some increases, but we also had some new friends to join us. And we had to talk about this is how we do business at the community school. Along with discipline decreasing, we've also seen increases in student achievement. This is our student achievement data. Again, the school opened in 2017-18 school year. We met expected growth, but you'll notice our growth index is negative. And even though it was negative, we still met expected growth. None of our students were proficient on the test. And our school performance grade was an F with a score of 16. Because of this year's scores, that 2017-18 year score, our school was identified as a comprehensive support and improvement school, a CSI school, meaning when we look at all of the schools in North Carolina that receive federal funds, our school scored in the bottom 5%. In 2018, 2019, our school met expected growth, but if you notice that growth index flipped from a negative number to a positive number. We did have a student to be proficient on the test, and our performance score improved to a 22. We were still an F, but our performance score increased. In 2019, 2020, we were shut down due to the pandemic, so there was no testing. In 2020, 2021, school districts were all over the place. Some offered online instruction, some had in-person instruction, some had hybrid instruction. So the state really didn't look at growth status, but they did look at achievement, and 14% of our students were proficient. And because we did not have a growth number, we did not have a school performance grade, because the school performance grade is made up of growth and achievement. In 21-22, we met expected growth. We had a positive growth index. Our student achievement increased to 43.3%. We exit CSI status, meaning we were no longer identified among the bottom 5% of schools in North Carolina receiving federal funds. Our performance score improved to a D with a score of 50. In 22-23, we met expected growth. Our growth index was positive. Student achievement increased. Our performance score was a 55, and we improved to a C. And then during the 23-24 school year, the year we just ended, we exceeded growth. Our student achievement increased to 61.9%. Our school performance letter grade was a C, but our performance score increased to a 63. And when we look at school performance grades, a 70 is considered a B. So we are halfway to earning a B. When we look at our test data over 7 years, you will notice both in reading and math that the scores increased each year. In science, this represents 4 different cohorts, or this represents multiple cohorts of children, because science is only given in the 5th grade. But again, you will see increases even in the midst of the pandemic as it relates to the community scores in the grade test data. We looked at the scores of our 5th grade students and how they compare to other 5th graders in North Carolina. So first we looked at those students who scored in the college and career ready range. The community schools 5th graders actually outperformed those students in North Carolina in the 5th grade when it comes to reading, math, and science. We also had a higher percentage of students who were considered grade level proficient in reading, math, and science in the 5th grade when we compare them to other 5th graders in North Carolina. One of the keys is making sure that our children are able to read and understand what they've read. Make sure they're able to do that well. Language and early literacy, that is an area that we focus on very heavily at the community school. Skilled reading is a language-based ability. Its development depends on linguistic knowledge and processes that initially develop for speaking and listening. And the relationship between language and literacy is a reciprocal in nature, and it changes over time. And this is research that was done by Hennessy in 2019. Another piece of research that I would share is from the National Early Literacy Panel in 2008. And it says the ability to produce and comprehend spoken language is one of the earliest predictors of literacy achievement. And finally, research from Romeo in 2019, early experiences and socioeconomic status can shape children's language and reading development. Providing high-quality language settings can boost phonological skill growth, and it can mitigate low-resource environments and lead to better reading outcomes. One of the strategies that we have to promote early literacy and early language development is the Pirate Playgroup. The Pirate Playgroup actually started at ECU in 2016 with daycares and preschools, and it worked to integrate literacy and language programs. It's largely based on the Lindemann phoneme sequencing program, along with the Talkies program for oral language comprehension and expressive. This is a multi-sensory approach to help children improve academic, phonemic, and phonological skills by forming connections between sounds, letters, and words. There's also vocabulary and comprehension are also improved through establishing concrete connections between words and images. What does the playgroup look like at the community school? Well, it's led by a speech language pathologist, clinical instructor from the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. This faculty member has small groups of speech language pathology students, and they work weekly with our kindergarten children. And there's a clear collaboration between the speech language pathologist and the classroom teacher. The classroom teacher and the speech language pathologists are able to talk about what will be done, and it is able to be continued and reiterated within the classroom after the speech language pathologist has left for the day. So what's the format of the lesson? They start off with circle time, a whole group time, where they review previous sounds and letters and they introduce new sounds and letters. Then they break up into small groups, groups of 2 to 3 children, and they may complete a letter sound worksheet or multisensory activities or rhyming activities, or they may work on vocabulary flashcards, or they may read a story aloud. And then they conclude by having circle time again. They bring the whole group back together and they review the lesson and review the story. Here are some of the sample activities that you would see. If you were to come into a playgroup session, you may see students using magnetic letters or writing in sand. You may see them working with clay, or what I call the old-timey Etch-a-Sketch, to help with their activities and their literacy. Here are some worksheets on handwriting and writing your name. In terms of comprehension, here are texts that are used, and we're asking the critical questions of what, where, why, and when. So I want to share with you, I've shared with you about how the playgroup is implemented in our school and some of the activities that are used, but I want to share with you the impact that it can have. So I want to share with you the work of one of our scholars. His name is Gianni. Gianni has now moved into the 6th grade for the 24-25 school year, but he started with us at the community school. And Gianni was a wonderful young man who had lots of energy. He was the only male child in his home, but the kindergarten team got to know Gianni and found out that he loved to write and paint. So Gianni painted this, and it said, he said to his teachers, "I'd like to give this to Miss Cole." And they said, okay. And so they brought him to me. And he said, "Miss Cole, I want you to have this." And I said, "Oh, Gianni, it is beautiful." And I noticed across the top there were some letters, THEPORIOF. And I thought to myself, my goodness, what does this say? And so I said, Gianni, read this to me. And he looked at me like, can't you read? So I said, no, buddy, I want to hear you read. So he said, okay. It says the principal. And I'm like, yes, I see it. It says the principal. And he says, can you put this up on your wall? And I said, absolutely. And Gianni brought this to me in September 2018. In October, Gianni brought me this principal. And he said, do you have the other one? I said, yes, I do. He said, do you know what to do with it? I said, yes, I'll put it up on the wall. The next picture, Gianni brought me in November. Now, Gianni is going from right to left, but it reads, I like the principal. He said, do you know what to do? I said, I got it, buddy. I'll put it up with the others. This is Gianni at Christmas. Santa is giving the principal a present. Santa is nice. Now, this is still the same scholar in kindergarten. This is Gianni, and of course, I know exactly where to place it. Now, the next piece was inspired by the Kinder Scholar study of Chinese New Year. Gianni wrote, Miss Cole is training Kung Fu. She is at the Great Wall of China. She is looking for a dragon. I'm not really training in Kung Fu, but this is what came to Gianni's mind in his writing. This is Gianni, again, same scholar, at the end of the school year. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Miss Cole. She saw a tiger and she ran away. Then she came up with a plan to catch the tiger. She put some food out for the tiger and hid behind a rock. When the tiger came, she jumped out and tied him up with a rope. She took him to the zoo and she named him Petey. Again, Gianni at the beginning of kindergarten, Gianni at the end of kindergarten. We go from having a series of letters to having a complete story with sentences that start with capital letters and end with a punctuation mark. There are characters, there's a problem, and there's a solution. So I continue to follow Gianni over the years. And this is Gianni in first grade. I have a dream. My dream is to go to college and make good grades. I want to be like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I want to change the world. I want to help others. I want to make the world a better place. I want to be a minister because I can help people. I can spread kindness to come to the world. I can fight with words, not fight with hands. I can stop people from fighting others. I want to do good things. You can change the world too. And this is Gianni in 2020, first grade. Now, this is Gianni in second grade. Dear Miss Cole, I've been reading chapter books in second grade. My favorite book is Dogman because Petey is funny and his clone. Do you like Dogman books? Are you doing great? I'm doing great because I'm the smartest. What is your favorite color? Mine is blue. Love, Gianni. Now, after Gianni completed second grade, he realized it was not too cool to talk with the principal. So he would pull me to the side in the cafeteria or he'd say a quick word to me in the hallway. But I continued to follow Gianni, and he scored in the college and career ready range in third, fourth, and fifth grade. Again, our school built upon his assets, recognized those areas in which he was good, and helped to make them great. And there are Giannis all over our building that we are working to grow, especially as evidenced by our North Carolina end of grade standardized test scores. But again, early language and literacy development is key. So when we look at the playgroup, there are benefits for our community school scholars as well as our speech language students. For the community scholars, they have positive interactions with college students. Again, they're able to ask them questions about college and begin to plant seeds that possibly one day they too could go to college. It helps to strengthen their oral language skills, and there is a focus on early literacy skills. For our speech language pathology students, they learn about group management in real time. They learn about collaboration with classroom teachers, and they learn about language and literacy development in a real world setting. At this time, I invite you to create an action plan to support a need in your school. We all have needs. But when it comes to action planning, let me share with you, we have to be intentional about it. And we have to know that the work we're doing, we cannot do by ourselves. It requires support from others. So on your table, you've got a handout, a template for an action plan. One of the first things I'll ask you to do is determine a need. Now, you may have many needs in your school, and sometimes it's difficult to tackle all of them. And so, an approach is to consider the most pressing need and focus on that need. For example, when I first got to the community school, literacy and the need for our children to read well was a pressing concern. And so, that was the area of focus. Next, identify a potential partner that you could support or that could be of support to you in the teaching and learning process. For the community school, it was working with the pirate play group and the speech language department candidates to help strengthen that oral language development and early literacy. Brainstorm benefits and challenges to the partnership. It's important that you're real with yourself. How can this help our children? How can this help our teachers? How can this help our families? And what are some bumps we may run into as we are working through the process? What resources do you need? And then establish a timeline. It's very helpful for me if I put down dates beside when tasks need to be completed because it helps me stay on track and I'm more prone to get them done. So we'll take just a few minutes for you to work on your action plan. And after working on your action plan, we'll have a conversation with people at our table about what we were able to think about. Again, the work of educating our children, it's a tremendous task, and it's not one that we should take on by ourselves. By partnering with others, we can do so much for our children and families. There's actually a painting in my office that the staff gave me and the students gave me, and it says, "Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much." So I invite you, please work with others so that we can provide the very best quality education for our children. Thank you.
It's a national report that looks at the status of rural education across the country. Shout out to Jerry. He's one of the authors on that report. It is like the report, and it's really a great dive into what's happening every 2 years in rural education. It drills it down to the state level, and then it looks at it nationally. And there's some great data points that have been added in and looked at over time around our supports and work with multilingual learners. But we have to just always, I can't emphasize this enough, but people, relationships are the center. Those that are closest to the issues are best situated by number 5 there, right? We go farther together. Conversations are critical. I didn't make these tenets up that you see right in front of you, but I've cleaned them over the years, getting to work with amazing groups and people, and I fully commit to these particular tenets of engagement. And I think that's the way that we just keep expanding and working. So multilingual learners is step 1, right? Like, and see what exactly can we bring into the classroom and share and support. There's a lot of great things that are happening right there in that scale, in that world, or they're in the researches and supports around there. I think we are, I'm over on my time Jerry's supposed to be introduced at this point. Hi, Jerry. But I will just put my contact information up there, and I will make just a few edits on the PowerPoint, and then I will share it back so that you can send it out to folks, Dr. Holt.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And now we're going to transition. Thank you, Dr. Cuthrell, to Dr. Jerry Johnson. Oh, if I can get the right slides deck up. And let me pull this. We'll be ready to go. Let me see which one is yours. Yes, Dr. Johnson. Okay. Yeah. So I do want to say, as we're transitioning out, we will be sending out a survey at the end of the session today for people to answer questions, give us feedback on things that went well, things that could have been improved. And we are also going to provide you with the opportunity to let us know if you're interested in connecting here at ECU with any of the researchers or any of the projects that are going on, so we can get you connected with those people and start that moving forward. Thank you.
So now I will be introducing Dr. Jerry Johnson. Dr. Jerry Johnson holds the Phoebe Moore Dale Distinguished Professorship in Rural Education at East Carolina University, the 2017 recipient of the Stanley A. Brzezinski Memorial Rural Education Research Award from the National Rural Education Association. He is the author of more than 70 publications on rural education, community schools, and place-based learning. Johnson's research has been supported by external funding from the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Education Sciences and Office of English Language Acquisition, state departments of education, private foundations, and local school districts. Please join me in welcoming our final speaker for the day, Dr. Jerry Johnson.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me. It's good to be with you all today. Before I get started, let me follow up on something that Kristen mentioned when she was asked the question about rural multilingual learners in North Carolina, and she made reference to Why Rural Matters. Why Rural Matters is this report that comes out every couple of years, and it's a lot of numbers, but the numbers are meant to tell the story of what rural education, rural schools, and rural communities look like across the U.S. And what we learned about rural multilingual learners in the 2023 report, which is the most recent, is North Carolina has the third largest absolute rural ML student population in the nation, after Texas and California. 33,000 plus students, about 7% of all rural students in North Carolina are multilingual learners. Let me echo one other thing that Kristen said. You're going to hear a lot of echoes of things that Kristen talked about in mine. It won't be a repeat. While Kristen was talking high level, the Institute and agendas and that sort of thing, my main talk, I'm going to talk about some very specific practices and some things that you can apply, those of you who work with students. But I do want to mention one other thing in response to that question about rural MLs, and Kristen spoke really well to the idea of celebrating multilingualism as an asset. And as part of the introduction, you mentioned I did some work that was funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of English Language Acquisition. I was a co-PI on a large research project in Florida to prepare 100 dual language teachers for 10 schools that were implementing dual language programs there. Dual language, as opposed to EL programs, operate from the position that two is better than one. That every kid, we kind of you accept from the beginning in a dual language program that we owe it to every kid to have more than one language. I do a lot of international work. I'm going to share some examples, a couple of cases from a trip I took last spring to Argentina. I may mention some work I did in Poland last year. I am hopelessly monolingual, and struggle in these settings. And so I'm really, really envious of people who are bilingual and trilingual and who can speak other languages. And so as we do think about these students who have this gift of growing up in a household where they're exposed to more than one language, and they're able to make connections between the language they speak at home or the language that their family speaks and the language that's being taught in school, that's something we really need to celebrate and cultivate. One of the examples that I'm going to use, it's actually from Wales, where I can speak the language, it's English. It is all kind of centered around that particular manifestation of literacy and language instruction. So I'll get to that in a second, but I wanted to touch on those things first. So what I hope to do, is talk a little bit about this idea of place-based learning, of really grounding what we teach and what kids learn and what they do in their learning activities in a specific place. And what that can mean, especially in terms of language and literacy instruction, which is, you know, what you're interested in. I'm going to share some little mini case briefs of things that I've seen and learned from amazing practitioners in the past year or so, who are doing this kind of work on the ground. And then what I want to spend, hopefully about half of our time together, is I want to work with you to generate some ideas for place-based learning activities that you can do in the settings where you work or settings where you have some influence. To help me wrap my head around that, can I first do a quick scan of what people do for a living? So how many of you work directly with learners in some kind of capacity as teachers or clinicians or? Okay, most of you. How many of you work with people who will work with teachers or will work with students? So preparing people for those kinds of things. Okay, so if I ask you in a little while to think about a school that you know and think about the community that it serves, you'll be able to do that? Okay. And if I ask you to think about learning activities, that won't be too much of a stretch? You know, some kinds of things that you could do with kids. Okay, good. Because I get really bored listening to myself talk. So I'm going to try to limit myself to about half of the time I have, and then the rest of it, we're going to interact. So the three case briefs I'm going to share, the first is from Argentina, the second is from Wales, the third is from Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And so with no further ado, can you hear me if I walk away from that? Yes? No? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Felt really constrained there behind that. So Dewey made a point about this disconnect for learners. It's a double disconnect. So the curriculum that they experience as school is disconnected from their social reality. It doesn't match what they know from their life outside school. Usually because it comes from someplace else. That's especially true for rural kids because most curriculum is developed in metropolitan and suburban settings. What kids are learning doesn't look or sound or feel like what they experience in the real world. So that's one kind of disconnect. The other kind of disconnect is then what they learn and what they're able to do as a result of what they learn doesn't have any real practical utility then when they age. You know, they take tests, or they write a paper, or they do some kind of formative event so they can get a grade, but it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't have any practical use. It doesn't have anything they can do. And that's not a great circumstance for wanting students to be engaged and think that learning is powerful. It doesn't connect to what they already know. It doesn't create any opportunities for doing something practical with it. And so if we flip that on its head, Greg Smith is a guy who writes about place-based learning. Smith said, valuable knowledge for most children. So knowledge that will get them excited, knowledge that will engage them, knowledge that will have them motivated to learn is knowledge that is, one, directly related to their own social reality. It connects to what they know and what they've lived and what they've seen. And it creates opportunities for them to engage in activities that are of service to and valued by those they love and respect. So they can do something with what they learned that has an impact on the people that they care about. Seem pretty obvious? We don't do this very well most of the time in schools. There are examples of doing it well. I'll share some examples with you, and then you're going to create some ideas for how you could do this. First, so the practice itself, the framework for doing this, it's not there with nothing. You start by mapping the assets of the community. It's always asset first before needs go. That's very important. What you don't want to do really in any kind of work, and this particular approach to teaching and learning borrows from something called asset-based community development, ABCD. There's an ABCD Institute at Northwestern or DePaul, one of the universities in Chicago. And they stress that you have to start with assets. No one benefits from making a long list of needs that you can't do anything about. But if you start with assets, you're making a list of what you have in your arsenal that you can marshal to go after the need once you identify them. So it's not about being naive. It's not about looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. It's a very practical decision. The practical decision is figure out everything you've got in your toolbox before you go look at what needs to be repaired. So you look at assets first. So you go through a process called community asset mapping. You identify what assets exist in your community. And then second, you look at what are the needs. And you do this by a lot of the kinds of things that Kristen talked about. You do that by engaging with community, by talking with people, by inviting people into gracious spaces through community learning exchanges, and then listening to them and learning from them about what their assets are, about what their needs are. You then look at where assets and needs intersect. So again, a language thing, the multilingual learners. I'm going to share an example with you from this elementary school in Wales that did this perfectly. You've got an asset, you've got a need. Where those two things intersect, you have an opportunity. And you have an opportunity to create a powerful learning experience for kids. You also have an opportunity to leverage that learning experience to have some benefit beyond school. Going back to the Greg Smith thing about being of service to those you love and respect. So you identify those opportunities, you generate project ideas, then, and this is important too, this fourth bullet, you align the project specifics to existing curriculum. When I meet with teachers about this, typically one of the responses I get is, we can't add one more thing. This isn't one more thing. This is a way of addressing the standards that you have to address, or doing the work that's in the curriculum that you have to. It's just a different way to do it. It's a more engaging way to do it. It's not something extra or different. So once you've identified projects, you look at what aspects of the existing curriculum you can address, and then you teach learn this. So this is I'm going to use a really pretentious phrase. I apologize in advance. This is a standardized approach to doing hyper-local work. Now, what I mean by that is place-based learning looks completely different everywhere you do it. If you've seen one place-based learning activity, you've seen one place-based learning activity. The process that you use to arrive at it, though, is very standardized. You use that process I just showed you a second ago, but you end up landing in very different places. And so I tend to think of it as, so most of my research is in policy. I study the policy that shapes how we organize and operate schools. Basically three types of policies, three buckets of policies. There are mandates, which tell you have to do something. There are constraints that tell you that you're not allowed to do something. And then there are affordance policies that are meant to facilitate or encourage or make it more likely that something's going to happen. Place-based learning is sort of an affordance policy. It's not a plug and play model or intervention or something. It's a process that can facilitate arriving at good learning. This is a phrase from a book on democratic leadership that I love, and I use it in a lot of different settings. I see place-based learning or the process of place-based learning as a tight, firm framing that enables and protects looser, more creative space. So you use this kind of rigorous protocol to create a really loose space where you can do learning activities that will look completely different at the ECU community school than they might look at P.W. Moore Elementary School. But they're both doing the same thing, just in ways that are attentive to their particular places, which are different. And then finally, transferability versus generalizability. This is nerdy research language. Generalizability is a term we use in quantitative research. The idea is you want to study something in a small sample so that you can say, okay, it applies to this larger population. That's not what we're trying to do here. Transferability, on the other hand, is the idea that you do something with enough richness and depth and contextual understanding that if you do it in your setting, Ms. Cole might read about the work you did in your setting, and she knows it's not going to work exactly the same in her setting, but she understands what you did and understands it well enough and understands the context in which you did it well enough that she can think about what changes she would need to make to transfer it to her place. So it's not moving. Oh. Okay. Okay. So this is the first example story I want to share with you. This is Escuela Intercultural number 941, Jasipora. Misiones province, Argentina. Misiones is this little finger of Argentina that sticks up between Brazil and Paraguay in the north of the country. Some maps actually leave it off. It's very remote. It's very rural. It's in the rainforest, and it has some large cities. There's a couple of decent sized cities, but a lot of it is very rural and very remote. This is a school where I spent some time last spring. Jasipora is beautiful moon in Guarani. That's the indigenous language there. If you approach this school looking through traditional Western lenses, you would see it as an object of pity. There were chickens walking around on the porch outside the school. Stray dogs wandered into classrooms and laid down on the tile to go to sleep while lessons were going on. If you had your head in the right space, though, when you went, you would see it as an amazing community school that was doing fantastic things. The first classroom that I walked into, there were, I think, about 8 or 9 children and 11 adults. I turned to the principal and said, "Who are all the adults?" And he said, "Those are parents. We do kindergarten together." So there's always a parent there, at least one, when they're doing kindergarten. They have, show some more pictures. Okay. The building on the top right is their health clinic. It's staffed by a nurse who is a member of the village who went away to university, got a nursing degree, came back. She works there. This is, you can't tell, but it's under construction. It's going to be a dental clinic that's on site also. They asked me while I was there, they said, we'd like for you to meet the chief. Would you like to meet the chief? And let me add this. So, indigenous Warreni communities are typically built around about 65 families. They've learned over 1,000 years that that's about the right size community to govern themselves. So this is a village of about 65 families. So they said, we'd like to meet the chief. You want to meet the chief? Yeah, that's great. Let's go meet the chief. We walk over there. The chief was on the ladder working on it. That's how the community happens. This is the principal. Teachers and administrators in schools in Argentina wear a white hat while they're working. And some school students do as well. That's like there was a trail around the school, and that's kind of a replica of traditional housing there. Nobody actually lives in that. It's meant to be an example. Top left, that's a house in the community. What does this have to do with language and literacy instruction? Warreni is and especially there are a couple of different versions of Warreni. Mbaya Warreni is the language that was historically spoken in this part of Argentina. It's a language that has largely died out. The school is bringing Warreni back and preserving Warreni by teaching it in the school. It's a dual language school. They're teaching both, and they're using dual language instruction to preserve the Warreni language and the Warreni culture. And it's all integrated. The language and the cultural work is all done as part of a single whole. I'll give you one example of that. There's a place-based learning project that kids are doing, working with a village elder to harvest these plants that are sacred to the Warreni. They grow them to maturity in a greenhouse, and then they replant them in the rainforest, so that they're preserving these plants that are special. 3rd grade, 4th grade kids, little kids doing this. And it's also, and this is another aspect of place-based learning, it really broadens the definition of who's a teacher. So the person in the village who knows about these plants, knows how to cultivate them, is now a teacher. Second example, Maindee Primary in Newport, Wales. Maindee is an elementary school in Newport, Wales that for various reasons ends up serving a lot of families who've been resettled in the UK because they've been displaced from other parts of Europe. So many of them are coming from very difficult circumstances. Think Syria, think Ukraine, and they're ending up in the UK, and a lot of the kids end up at the school. And so again, place, right? Every school is not the same. Every community is not the same. So what they're focused on in this particular school is, how do we help these families feel welcome? How do we help these families feel a part of this community? How do we bring them into our school community? And how do we celebrate those assets that they have? This is the one that speaks directly to that question we had earlier. So they have 42 languages being spoken among the students within the school. So they're teaching them all English, because that's the primary language of instruction. Most of the teachers only speak English, but they're also finding very creative ways to celebrate that rich asset that these kids bring there. Okay, a couple of examples of that. So Peace Mala is an international organization they belong to that allows them to interact with kids all over the world and talk about peace things. Everybody's seen that in like a language classroom, right? The poem you do with the words down the side. So they were doing Ramadan, and I went into this classroom, and the teacher was asking kids to for examples for each of the letters, and was kind of working his way down, and that activity. And the kids who responded here were lily white Welsh kids. Like this was not a classroom of Muslim kids. There were some, it's a very diverse school, but it was, again, the Ramadan is Beautiful, Amazing Mosques. I saw it was these two kids who were born in Wales, raised in Wales, but they know what Ramadan is. And they're learning about Muslim culture as part of their learning experience because they're there. The on the far left, the YI you see on the bulletin board, that is the Young Interpreters Program. So the Young Interpreters Program is something they have at this elementary school where the kids get to teach their native language to other kids as an enrichment elect. And so they'll have 2 or 3 going at a time. It's an after school activity. So there was a little girl, I walked into a classroom where a little girl was teaching a Polish class, and she had about 10 of her classmates in there. She was about a 5th grader, and she was teaching conversational Polish to her peers. And I got to use my one word of Polish that I remembered from my trip there. So I got to say dziękuję to her, which is thank you. And she was very happy to hear someone speak Polish. So again, they're not doing what Josipora does. They're doing what their place does. So they took the time to identify what are the assets that we have, what are the challenges that we have, where do they intersect, what's the opportunity. They have an opportunity here to use language diversity as a way to make people feel welcome and valued and a part of something that's big and multilingual and complicated, but that they feel a part of. Third example, P.W. Moore Elementary School in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Who knows it? Anybody? You know P.W. Moore? Yeah? Okay. I've been working with P.W. Moore for about 2 years now. This is a photo of a family dinner night that we do as part of the community schools work there. So once a month, we have a family dinner night. We have it catered. We invite family and community to come in. We get between 300 and 400 people. And we do, we have other things there. We'll have, we do it in kind of a 3-part rotation. We can only get about a third of the people in the cafeteria at one time. So there'll be like enrichment activities for the kids in the library. There will be workshops and opportunities for families. Like we did a financial literacy workshop once. Our colleagues from Elizabeth City State came and did a workshop on coping with stress for young moms. So there are activities going on in addition to the meal. For the meal, we organize it so that families sit with their child's teacher, but we encourage them not to like get the folders out and look at tests. This is fellowship. This is time. This is loose space to spend time together. What we've learned over time is that by letting people just hang out together, just have a meal together, just talk about who's got a new baby. There's always a new baby, every one of these. I get to hold a baby every time I go to one of these. That it's easier for them later to have those conversations about test scores, to have those conversations about behavior. I've had parents tell me that after breaking bread with my kid's teacher 5 times in the last 6 months, when the teacher called to tell me that my son needed, some help with his behavior, I trusted her that she had my kid's best interest in mind. So that's what we do as part of the community schools work, which is sort of off the topic of this, but anyway. Like the other schools, though, at P.W. Moore Elementary, we have really leaned into place. And the place where P.W. Moore is a complicated place. Bottom left. Anybody remember the police-involved shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. 4 years ago? Andrew Brown's house is about 150 yards from the elementary school. You could see it if it weren't for another house in between. So P.W. Moore and the community surrounding P.W. Moore has challenges if you look at census data. If you look beyond census data, it is a rich community with a vibrant history and heritage to reclaim. And we've really leaned into that. The school has leaned into that. By the way, over the last 3 years, and I don't say since we've been working with them, I'm not trying to take credit for this, but PW Moore has gone from an F to a D to a C in terms of their state accountability rating in 3 years. This is how they've done it. Focusing on place and the rich tradition and heritage of their place. That gentleman in the center is Peter Weddick Moore. Peter Weddick Moore was born into slavery, lost one of his parents to violence from the Ku Klux Klan, became a teacher, became a principal, became the president of what is now Elizabeth City State University. During segregation, the segregated black high school in Elizabeth City was named for him, P.W. Moore High School. And it was a center for excellence in academics and athletics that was known all across North Carolina. Nobody wanted to play them in sports, and they produced outstanding scholars who went on to do amazing things. We wanted to, as part of this work, as part of this place-based work, we wanted kids to understand and appreciate whose shoulders they were standing on as a way to give them something to feel really good about. So this, the students did an oral history project with videos. So they identified people who'd gone to, there was a P.W. Moore High School and then P.W. Moore Junior High and then P.W. Moore Elementary. So we identified people for them to reach out to, and they did an oral history project. Some faculty from Elizabeth City State and the history department helped us with this. And they recorded interviews with all of these people who'd gone to the P.W. Moore schools. And then we showed it for the first time at the inaugural alumni breakfast. We held the alumni breakfast the weekend of Founders Day at Elizabeth City State University, capture all those people coming into town for that. We had over 200 people sign up for this Saturday morning breakfast, alumni breakfast. We had 2 former professional athletes. One, anybody know who Johnny Walton is? Johnny Walton was one of the first black quarterbacks in the NFL. Played for the Philadelphia Eagles. From Elizabeth City, played for Elizabeth City State. Remember the glory days with Ron Jaworski? He was Jaworski's backup. So Johnny was there. There was a 3-star general who was the first black quartermaster general in the U.S. Army. He came. We had a 1946 graduate of P.W. Moore High School who came. And the kids got to present their oral history project. Again, doing something that is valued by those you love and respect. So the kids got to present their oral history project. The kids also got to serve and act as like ushers, guiding people to their table, and got to participate in the event. We auctioned things off. They raised money for the school. It was a really, really nice event. The kids were involved in all of it. Some other parts of the place that we're celebrating. Top left is a Rosenwald school that's on the ECSU campus. Anybody know what a Rosenwald school was? What the history of the Rosenwald schools was? In the early 1900s, Julius Rosenwald was a philanthropist. He was a very rich man in Chicago, from Sears Roebuck and Company. And he established a funding source to support Black communities in the South to develop schools, to build schools. So it was like a match. So if you could get the people together to like do the work of building a school, the Rosenwald Foundation provided the money for it. And there were over 800 Rosenwald schools in the South. North Carolina had more than any other state in the South, by the way. So you can find them still around places. ECSU has remodeled theirs now. So we've had learning events in there. So kids have actually gotten to go into the Rosenwald school and like have a lesson, have a class day. And then the other, I said that Elizabeth City has this complicated place, you know, it's also 50 miles from Kitty Hawk. So the kids are doing engineering programs. Elementary school kids go to engineering camp at Elizabeth City State. Elizabeth City State has amazing engineering and aeronautical engineering. So It's a STEM heavy project there too. Okay. So how we doing on time? Good. How much time do I have? 10? Talk too long. I'm sorry. We can do this though. So here's what I want you to do. Grab a sheet of paper and make 3 columns for yourself. Is it 10 minutes and then we have 15 for Q&A? Okay, so this can spill over into the Q&A. All right. So grab a scrap piece of paper and just create a table with 3 columns. In the first column, I want you to just brainstorm 3 or 4 assets that are directly linked to the place of your school or your community. Let me give you a definition of assets, students. Assets are people, places, things, buildings, outdoor spaces that have the potential to be leveraged for good without being diminished. That's an important part, the distinction between assets and resources. Resources diminish through use. Assets are not. So an example of an asset could be a children's museum. It could also be an empty field that could be developed into an outdoor learning space. It could be a historical figure who's from your community. P.W. Moore as a man is a tremendous asset for Elizabeth City. But so is the Coast Guard base in Elizabeth City. Three to four assets directly linked to your school's place and its cultural, social, economic, and or political past or present. Let's try to wrap this up in about 1 more minute. We'll go on to the next step. The 42 languages at Main D Primary was an asset that they had. The presence of elders who knew the old ways in Jasipora was an asset. Okay, in the second column, select one of your assets and identify an opportunity to leverage that asset in a learning activity. So what's a learning activity you could do based upon that asset that is related to language and literacy? Think about the example you've seen. P.W. Moore, that had this rich history of people who've gone to the different iterations of the school, and an oral history project was the learning activity. At the
what is the learning thing. So what's something individual leverage one of these activities?
Ready to move on? Okay. Next step now in column 3, identify 1 or 2 examples of academic content that could be addressed via the activity. So what are some skills, and you don't have to like have, specific North Carolina standards or anything. Just what are some knowledge or skills that you can help develop in kids through that learning experience? For example, with the oral history project, kids got experience with public speaking, with writing, because they had to write out the scripts and their protocols. They got some technology learning from the video and working with the district's technology person. So think about what are the things within a broader curriculum that could be addressed in the activity. I'm talking about doing something extra. We're talking about addressing the learning that you already expect kids will do, that can be in different ways on the age. Kids that need a more had to do some historical work using archival documents. That's a real skill like that. Primary sources, yeah, they have to interpret primary sources. One of the things they learned, I was looking at old school board minutes, is that the P.W. Moore High School that they built in 1923, that was $22,000 to build a brick high school. Yeah. Okay, what I'd like to do next is give you an opportunity to share with each other, but because we've got some onesie-twosie tables, can I ask you to move around some so that we've got, like, say, at least 4 at each table so you can share with each other? You're good. Let's see, you two. Actually, you want to go there? It's one of the. That's that. That's yeah. That's
Hey, folks. All right, let's each able to share one idea that you heard for a powerful learning experience that can generate legs to enhance language and literacy instruction and have a positive impact on the kids in the community. Yeah, come over here. Oh, sorry, should be my phone.
And in fact, I did and explain that I in our community. And I do our learner city at a school district and school setting, but I would parents come in and they sit there and they wait for their kids, but they're always asking questions and just being that response not only for the student but also for the parents. So building that building that community, building those relationships with them is just as important.
Let's talk. Have some ideas for how you can get that started. Email me. Yeah. Ms. David?
And so one of the things that we talk about, we have a really rich Native American culture that we often focus on. One of the things we talk about, and we need some of us that realize that these things, before we think about it, having our research and reading stories, right? There's going to get very good words. In addition to that, not only reading stories and fiction, or you can begin surgery right and but also taking this time to have space to send investment so that they actually see it. Not really plan, but I wrote it out and I can actually see it. Maybe have some of our family members about emotion. Things like that. So I think it's been connections.
And you talked about a concrete outcome and authentic. It's not like, oh, we think we should. Yeah. We were addressing a disconnect between the curriculum and learners and the community. So I'm just saying, we just thought that especially getting to the academic piece, the activity would be non-fiction text. And from the skills that would be pulled from would be identifying data, being able to summarize what they learned from that text. And then most importantly, getting the opportunity to see it in real time so that it makes those connections between what we already imagined out here from reading and writing and not actually visually doing this. Thanks.
I talked about what educating students. I've talked about to have more educating units from time from and music and Mandarin class. So we learned about the culture, and even like the language. I remember sometimes we used to make dumplings. We used to make dumplings, so it was kind of cool to learn about their heritage and all their culture. And it would like we also built all our relationships with them, and we would communicate with them even when they left to go back. So I thought that was really interesting to bring in a different culture, and they've also learned a lot about us.
And ECU.
And yeah.
We had collaboratively, she's from India, and she shares some really great resources, in terms of the automatic department in her area, she wants to push this to school. And how she can utilize that in New Zealand and analytics and some stuff. And what great future that. And then how she would incorporate that in terms of the activities for the and basically be all of the same kind of thing as we talk about. We talk about arguing the facets for being student, because of college, the educators, students, we have athletics, and health services. We also talk about community development, especially as it relates to that. Position for large minorities. The family, which probably the majority of the colleagues in school. And because of these occasions, you know, whatever that might be, they go to a lot of things that, you know, if it's farming equipment or, you know, farming resources or animals or whatever that may be, to have that hands-on learning, to have presentations, various aspects of the house. That topic is as well as fun. When we get the interest going from children, we become involved in that. And I like what I say about trying to involve the families. That's it. Then we talked about the ways that would be addressed with the cabinet in the activities would be vocabulary, writing, when we could set learning opportunities, or speak which you share with children, research opportunities, and then I sort of just
Thank you. You got to really get started on it.
We have no experience here, but I was able to learn how it's like 37% scanning, 33 combination, 10 operating, 10. And so there was actually more to study signature. They actually incorporated various as a class for everyone, and I believe that every grade level have a different language as they move on. They also did a lot of clubs and organizations for parents as well. Did a lot of nights for women who studied and everything as well as the Chinese New Year. They did something for everyone. And I think that is very special, especially with all the women's learning with you. Anyone else? Do you have input?
Okay, so I put my contact information up here. Anyone have questions? No. What's your role? Great question. The schools that I was sharing with now are all connected to the full service community schools where we're putting that we're doing the Christian learning. So we had a we were granted the Department of Education to look within safety community schools. And in North Carolina over 5 years, 60 schools that are related to years. ECU is the Rural Education Institute is the implementation lead for these. So we'll be implementing and that's the family internet stuff for community schools work. We'll be implementing in 20 schools, about 20 schools and about 7 or 8. So we're at 3 schools in Elizabeth City right now. Next year we're starting to expand to Hyde, Washington, and Bertie, in Northampton. And they'll tell me Warren, I'm trying to figure out whether Warren is east or central. I'm trying to think where the line is. Because of Vance, you're pretty close to Vance, aren't you? Vance is in the central region. I'm gonna be in Vance Monday. So much of this is either coaching people as they implement their new community schools, or in the case of somebody's international, they're going to see how people do it in the place where I'm going to learn to Wales. In Wales, they mandated that all schools would be, they call them community response schools there. So 1,500 schools in Wales, they're all going to be community schools. Yes. To be a community school? Well, the grants. And then us meeting with superintendents and board members to assess openness to that kind of change. What does you know? I don't know if that would be feast or yeah, I'm gonna we email it and remind me and I'll get into it. So I'll get you part in this, but there's something called the North Carolina Resource Coalition. And we got a $50 million grant from the U.S. Department of Education. That $50 million sits at the state level of North Carolina Community Schools Coalition, and then it's being implemented through 3 regions, West, Central, and East. And it's not using any already established definition. We just divided up the counties for this. So there are a couple of counties that, like Warren, I don't know if Warren's central, you said you're central. So your implementation lead would be Student U, which is based in Durham. Student U
but I'll find out. I mean,
Okay.
where Wayne County is. Well, thank you, and enjoy visiting everybody. Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like I can just run it today. Then I'm just going to buzz this like now. We're all okay with that. So right now, at this time, we're going to go to the requirements. I'm agree. I think we were like pretty and very important
Every day. It's wonderful experience. I can tell you, you guys are also stimulated to get to the and to see all the ideas. One of those speeches that I did from Tracy, Jerry, Kristen, awesome to see how that's such an inspiration. That again, I think it's important to see that we may know a lot, but when we get together and we talk to each other and figure out how to know them, we work together, it's it's never ending. It's wonderful. I think we have such hope. To me, coming here today gives me hope in our community what we can do. Everyone of them. And I also see like, you know what? I might be old, but I need to get out there and start doing some more things. These financial dollars and so on. And as I was talking to Brady a lot in terms of how in the community getting out and doing things here as really stimulating to see that everything that for today is stimulating you to help all of them. Because again, you got a family with children, it helps you as well, right? It's wonderful. And so I definitely appreciate everything that has gone on today and talked about. So one of the things that I will say in the closing is, and I was talking to Tracy about this as well, she was on the talk, is one of the things that we said that one thing we can inspire our kids to do and our families is to have conversations. That one of the things I used to talk some to education, different majors, I can go around and talk about that. That's one of the things that happens right now. That a lot of times we're doing this, right? We're looking on the computer. We're not paying attention to each other. And I think those conversations are important that we have with our kids, with all the families that we have, because it's that back and forth that helps you grow. It's not just listening and then responding. It's that conversation. So again, I want to thank everyone today for coming today. And thank you for inviting me back today as well. And this is such a wonderful, inspirational symposium. And I know that Barbara Bremer would be so happy about this. And I know that we can do maybe again annually, let's grow this. Maybe you guys can get people out and start coming and making this even bigger, that we can have an impact in so many ways. But thank you so much for this wonderful symposium today. Thank you.
So like she said, thank you again to Dr. Johnson today for being here, for Ms. Cole, for Dr. Kuchel for presenting. And then at the end of this, like it was mentioned before, you'll all receive a survey just to let us know, your thoughts for today, what worked, what didn't. And then also you can just enter your contact information in that QR code that'll be sent in your email with that survey. Do we have any questions before we end for today? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, they will. You'll get that information through there. And then before y'all leave, we have bagels in the back that are left over. So if you want to grab yourself a plate and get one on your way out, we would love for you to. And then we've also got some spare waters if you want any of that too. But thank y'all so much for coming out today. Like this morning class, it's hard. Miss Kim, am I good to log off?
I couldn't hear.
Can you say that one more time?
What was your question?
I just asked if I was good to log off.
Yes, we're all
Okay.
good.
All right. Thank you so much.